Hi guys, today we talk with Charles Herzer. You know, he is very famous researcher of ancient Egypt, and we talk about Osiris and Isis, their origination and where they come from. And we're talking about this myth, and we're talking about our mysteries of ancient Egypt, like pyramids in Giza and other stuff. So it's very interesting podcast. Watch it, like it, subscribe, and we hope you like it. My question is about, Osiris and Isis, origination and where they come from and how all this was. Because, we know a lot about this Abydos, about temples, about what was before, but we don't know where these people came from. This is very interesting.
Yes, and you're right. This is of all the tracking that one can do. You can only get back to the fifth dynasty with vacation of Osiris. That is after the Great Pyramid was built. So it's, not a period, not far enough back in history. They suspect, Egyptologists suspect, that he has, Isis and Osiris and Horus were around a lot longer before, and because kings' names back all the way to the first dynasty were Horus names. So
yes.
So that it's clearly there. The trail is lost in history right now, unless they dig up something else. It'll be a while before it just dead ends there. But the way you can work around that is when you look at the myth and you find out and go back to the origins of where they're first mentioned, back around 2400 BC or so. They were part of the Heliopolitan creation process, and which formed, into the Egyptian mind, the created cosmos. And so this myth is a clue that they were back earlier, and they are formed as part of the group of nine, the Ennead, the Great Ennead. They are in the very fabric of the created world. Of the accounts, the first recognition was in a tomb in the fifth dynasty before the Unis's pyramid texts were recorded. And then shortly after, maybe 50 years or so, the pyramid texts appeared in Unis's pyramid. And there are lots of mentions of Isis and Osiris and Horus and details of the myth. But the myth that we all recognize as it actually comes from a Greek philosopher, not from an Egyptian priest of Osiris or Isis. First dynasty AD philosopher and historian named Plutarch. And it's Plutarch's account that that people recognize and fill in all the details. Now, I might remind you, when Plutarch was alive, Egypt was under Roman rule in the first century AD. And his audience was not Egyptians. His audience were Greeks and Romans. So that there is a lot in that myth that can't be traced back to the pieces from the earlier fragments found in the different papyri and the pyramid texts of their own Egyptian writings. Historians, quote unquote, of that era, did use a lot of liberty in what information they filled in to what they were actually given from Egyptian priests and priestesses. The way I thought what I'd do is I'd explain a little bit about Heliopolitan creation process to show you how Isis and Osiris fit into the scheme of Egyptian thinking, and then go on and pick up on a couple of texts that were Egyptian texts from the New Kingdom, the 20th dynasty, which fills in more of the details in a thing called the Contendings of Horus and Set, and why these things are important to the Egyptians, besides from the Heliopolitan creation process, which is enormous. It's also because it's directly tied to Egyptian kingship, which was the fiber of the success to the long-term Egyptian civilization. And the third tie was that Osiris was a divine being, clearly, but he's the only of the gods who actually dies, is dead, and resurrects. And that was a link that then tied the Egyptian people to him and Isis directly, because she was the source of his being revived. So that's sort of just a broad framework, but the detail is something. But for the early age of the stuff, you're not gonna. It just doesn't. They haven't dug it up yet. It's lost or still buried somewhere. And they've been doing a lot of work in Abydos over the last 2 or 3 decades, and they really haven't covered much there. There is, of course, what the Egyptians pointed to as the tomb of Osiris at Abydos, but that was actually for a first dynasty pharaoh named Jer, and during the Middle Kingdom, 1,000 years after Jer was dead, they converted his tomb into the shrine that they used for the festivity. With respect now for the Heliopolitan creation myths, this is important because it's the formation of Egyptian thought, and it's the way they thought about things, which is vastly different than the way we do. And in the beginning, there was this primordial abyss, just a void. There was no light, there was no darkness. It was just undifferentiated matter, is the way our physicists would put it. Out of that, he stirred and created the first two, or the triad of the initial process of creation at Heliopolis. Heliopolis, by the way, was from the Bible in Inu in Egyptian, and it was located roughly where Cairo is today. So inside of the pyramids, but that was the first center that the Greeks called Heliopolis, which is city of the sun, and the Egyptians called Inu, and it shows up in the Bible as On. The first part of the creation is actually the formation. The first 5 of the 9 gods are really involved with the formation of the created cosmos. And Shu and Tefnut were the first offspring of Atum. Atum is said either to have masturbated the beginning of existence or spit it out, depending on the earlier interpretations. But it was an outflow by him that initiated the process. And Shu is represented with the air and Tefnut with moisture, elemental things, but nothing firm. That comes in the next stage when their offspring, Geb and Nut, appear. And Geb is the earth and Nut is the sky. So you have that aspect of creation now materializing, if you will. And then from those gods, those first 5 of the formation, there are now 4 offsprings. The oldest son of Geb, and Geb is the earth god, is Osiris. Then comes Isis, the oldest sister, then Set, and finally Nephthys. And those are the 9 that create the Ennead, the great Ennead. And those are myths. Those 4 represent the aspect of what we recognize with our eyes and ears and hands and touch as the created earth. So Osiris then becomes, as firstborn of Geb, the king of Egypt first. But Geb represents the planet Earth. So the throne of Geb is all of the earth, but the focus is on Egypt. As such, according to the legend, he was a beneficial ruler, and he created cultivation. He created laws based on Ma'at. Ma'at is a Egyptian concept of, I guess, it's everything from truth to cosmic harmony. It's everything that goes, everything that unfolds the way it should. In a binary system, which was created by first Shu and Tefnut out of the monad, Atum, you had always the counter forces, because without the counter forces, the created universe would collapse, couldn't exist. And the counter forces to Osiris and Isis are Set and Nephthys. And those are the 2 balances. Simply, Osiris represents Ma, cosmic order. Set represents what the Egyptians called Isit. That is disharmony, discord, destruction. And those are the forces that opposed creation and the maintenance of creation. So that's the way that the system began to unfold. So Osiris, as the good king, institutes that structural society. He teaches, as they called the Egyptians before they were educated by Osiris, barbarians, and they were taught to learn what to do correctly. They were also, as I said, taught agriculture to civilize them, take them from the hunter-gatherer stage of humanity to the cultivating stage, which allowed them to produce enough food so you wouldn't be just looking for your next meal, but you could begin to accomplish other human attributes. Now, these creation myths are the Egyptian equivalent, as Jim Allen, a scholar here in the U.S. at Brown University, calls them. They are myths about the forces of nature. They aren't gods like we think of them. They're the forces, the 9 forces of the Ennead that come together, that cause the created cosmos. So that what you have are beneath these myths are the ancient Egyptian scientific textbooks. They describe the phenomena of how things unfold in what we call our world. There's layers and layers and layers in Egyptian thinking, and it's almost like peeling an onion. You start and you take off one, and there's another under it, and another and another, and you keep on getting that kind of a focus. So we have the evolution here now to where we have the good firstborn king, having done good. He leaves Egypt to go spread his humanitizing, or civilizing is a better word, process to the rest of the world. During that time, Isis, his wife and queen of Egypt, was in charge, and she kept order, functional. When Osiris returned some years later, Set became very jealous. And this is where we start to get the portion of the myth that's best described by Plutarch. And you'll see the tenor of it starts to change, but it's nevertheless, it's important to keep this in mind because it fills in certain aspects that we can work around and get to the core that's beneath the myth and the meaning that it was for the Egyptians. So upon his return, Set, jealousy, and a key feature of Issa, and a disrupted, destroying emotion, human emotion, leads him to put together a band of 72 conspirators, and they plot. And what they plot is he devises that having measured Osiris's exact height, he would create this beautiful chest. And they were at a festive banquet, and he had that chest brought into the banquet, and in jest said, whoever fits in this will be able to have it. And all the people tried and nobody did. And when Osiris got in, of course, it fit. And the 72 conspirators leapt upon the coffin, nailed it shut, covered it in lead, molten lead, and then sent it out to the Nile, went out to sea. They don't explain how a lead coffin floats so well, but that's in the story. That's the way the story goes. And they said this happened on the 17th day of the month of Athrith, which was the 3rd month of the Nile inundation, when the land would be basically underwater. And so the flow would be good. And it was also in his 28th year of the reign. I'll come back at some point to talk about number symbolism, because it's very important to Egyptian thinking. When you see numbers in any of these things, they're not idly put in there. They usually represent trends. And they're usually, a lot of them are attracted directly to cosmic trends. Things that when you didn't have electric lights and you were watching the night sky and watch what the moon did, for instance, will give you a keen understanding of how it operates. And we'll see these things that weaved into how they used text to further different types of concepts that were important to. And the 17th is a key date, and it's key because it marks the death of Osiris. They also say, at a later point, not in Plutarch's account, oh yes, later it is, I'm sorry, that he is rejuvenated on the 19th of the same month. And so there again, it's a clue that obviously he couldn't be in 2 days. I mean, it took Christ 3 to get out of the tomb. What we're seeing here is another reference to an aspect of the cycle that he's referring. And I guess maybe here might be a good time to introduce the thinking. Kingship, divine kingship, which was what Osiris really represented, had a firm base, not just in solar religion, but also lunar. Simplistically put, the sun god was Ra, and Osiris was the moon. And the way one can see this unfolding is exactly what you take the lunar cycle and we put it overlay it on what we see with the number symbolism. The 17, what does 17 mean? In the lunar cycle, describes the period from the day when the moon is full, which from the text Isis said she and Nephthys put Osiris in the moon when it was full, complete, whole. They restored him, was the symbolism. So you have the full moon. And then Osiris in the moon presided over what happened in the phase after the moon had passed fullness. And that's what they call the waning phase of the lunar cycle. So Osiris, and what that represented when you looked up in the night sky was the moon was getting dismembered. It was becoming narrower, smaller and smaller. And after 14 days, it vanished. And then it could stay out of sight, which they believed it was down in the underworld, the netherworld to Duat. It would then mysteriously appear low in the western horizon later in the cycle. So the complete cycle of destruction lasts for those 17 days, that 17-day period, which is what the 17 symbolizes in the numbers. What follows with the 19th of the same month is a cycle of 19. And what that represents, and I'll bring it back to the text in a minute, that represents is a period of time from when the moon is full till reappears in the night sky as the newborn crescent moon. And that phase of the cycle, Isis said that in a text about Isis, that she put Osiris when the moon was full. Horus was conceived in the blacked out, or what we call the new moon, the phase when the moon's in the underworld, and was conceived on the day of the blacked out moon and was born, Horus was born on the day of the first crescent visibility. So you now have both halves. And this is what people don't have. Kingship, Egyptian kingship is one god. Divine kingship is one god, but it's got two sides of the coin. Horus for the living phase and Osiris for the dying phase. So for the waning of the moon, that was Osiris. The disappearance of the moon, it's in the underworld where the rebirth occurs. The rebirth is not Osiris. It appears as Horus, his son. So that's the way they understood this cycle. And their idea of dying, death, and rebirth crossed plants, animals, as well as humans. It applied that principle, that fundamental principle. One of those Neteru, the gods, so-called gods of Egypt, was that concept of existence. And Osiris personified that, and Isis facilitated it. We now have Osiris floating down the Nile and sealed in his coffin, and he washes ashore up in Byblos, which is in Syria, today's Syria. And when he washes ashore, it's immediately engulfed in a erica tree, a type of scrub tree that grew in that part of the Mediterranean. And it became enormous in size. And the legend goes that the king of that country cut it down and used the pillar as a support of his palace. Inside that pillar was, of course, the coffin entombed was the coffin of Osiris. So then there goes on a long deal with Isis, who is mourning the loss of her husband and in pursuit to find his body, and goes all across the things. This is the longest part of the myth that Plutarch records, and it's for the interest of the story rather than the meaning of it. Eventually, she, after all these misadventures, she finally comes to there, engages with in a disguised form with the wives of the king, and is able to extract Osiris's coffin and bring it back to Egypt. And she hid it. But this isn't the end of their tale, because old Set, who had, by the way, after he killed Osiris, became king of Egypt, and chaos had began to spread. He happened to be out hunting in the light of the full moon, wild boar, and he came upon this chest of Osiris that which he recognized immediately because he was the one that built it and sealed it shut. He was enraged. His anger flew. He ripped it open and cut him into 14 pieces and spread them over Egypt. And there you see another aspect to that same tale, the 14 visible phases of the waning lunar cycle. That's the tie-in from myth to what the science is underneath. The tale continues because then Isis has to go out and wants to recover these particles, these pieces of her husband, and put them back together. The Egyptians believed strongly that the mummy, in order to exist in the afterworld, you could not be cremated. You had to be redivinitized. And this is by being reconstructed through the mummification process till you were made whole, complete, just like the full moon, just like Osiris. She's about and looks for it. She finally gets the pieces together and recreates them. But unfortunately, by one version of the tale, the phallus is missing. It was eaten by the fishes. So she recreates the organ, and then she and Nephthys awake Osiris with the fluttering of their wings. They were disguised as kites, female falcons, and inseminated. And Osiris, revivified, was then able to impregnate her, which was then their son, which would be Osiris. Now, these views of this impregnation scene are actually in the Seti's temple in Abydos, and they're in what they call the Osiris suite of rooms, and they're a very important, a corner kingpin of the mythology there, and it was still practiced or followed in the New Kingdom. So some 1,300 years after the pyramid text. With Horus became the next phase of the myth, which is called the Contendings, because actually Horus was summoned by Osiris to the underworld, asking him to vindicate his death, which Horus agreed to. Of course, Horus the child had to be hidden in the Delta region to keep her away from Seth, because Seth, of course, would kill it to maintain possession of the throne of Egypt. So already we've now got kingship involved in this myth about rulership over Egypt and how it was going to be passed in the future. This is what we're approaching in this part of the myth. So Osiris grows up into young manhood. He takes on Set. They're both very powerful gods. Isis has got his back, her son's back, and they're able to repeatedly defeat Set. And this goes on for 80 years. This struggle, and the gods, and they have immortal. So 80 years is not a long time. The other gods became discontent with this, and they formed a tribunal. They were going to put an end to the struggle, and what they were going to do was they were going to rule on who should have the crown of Egypt, who should be the legal heir, the rightful heir to the inheritance of Osiris, which was the office of kingship of all of Egypt. The tribunal, and the tribunal is very important, it included the great Ennead, but also some other gods and goddesses. And even though the Egyptians used the word Ennead, which is really a function of 9, it's also a function of the way Egyptians wrote plural. So there was the greater Ennead, there was the lesser Ennead, there were a different number of gods. But the gods were involved with this decision about how rulership should be passed on. And this is very important to any kind of monarchy that wants to maintain control, because there's always going to be fights between brothers or even sisters who want to inherit the throne, and the children too, who also think they have a right to the throne. So this part of the story is about the functioning of kingship in ancient Egypt. and that is resolved by the tribune, by ruling by it. And they weigh the pros and cons and they go back and forth. And that's not important to the story. What they finally decided was that to vindicate Osiris, declare Horus true of voice, Ma Heru, true of voice, meaning he speaks the truth. Seth is not speaking the truth. He of Issa, and he is awarded his father's inheritance. And that's really the essence of that part of the phase, which then means he takes over the crown of Egypt and rules over the Egypt. Ergo, like the Brits, the firstborn son in Egypt was the one that was entitled to the right to the throne by birth. And that kept a lot of the political struggles under control in Egypt by establishing that sort of a system right from the beginning, because it's in the nine gods of the Heliopolitan creation myth and process. And the 10th god of the myth is the offspring of Isis and Osiris, being Horus. Now, Horus is the 10th. 10th is the start of a new cycle. And so Horus represents this aspect of being a new cycle, a new beginning, a new path. And those factors then would rule the more current environment as we get closer and closer to our day and age. He then goes on, and then there's the aspect, the third important aspect that comes out of this myth, this one myth, as I hinted to right in the beginning, where I said is that the process of a god dying, the only god in Egypt myth that actually dies, becomes the model for every man or every woman can become an Osiris. And that brings it into the realm of the transformation that occurs in the netherworld, in the afterlife. And that fit into their philosophy of life. And that forms the third basis of how they viewed the resurrection or rebirth. And that used the same format that they decided Mott with the tribunal's announcement of Horus being true of voice and Osiris's vindication. So when you see these weighing in the heart type papyruses, or even in some tombs, the drawing of them, this is what it is. The tribunal of 42 was like the tribunal that ruled on the future of kingship, the future role, the transmission of royal power. And that royal power is really something that we all inherited. And this is where it gets in a more esoteric level of the myth. And this comes to the edge from the king, because Osiris, being a god, and a good god, it has a seeded divinity in him, which he implants in Isis, and it results in Horus. Horus is the grandson of the ruler of the earth, Geb. He inherits the throne of earth. Well, people also are the children of Geb. We live on the earth. We are the children of Geb and Nut. We live in the cosmos, which is dominated by sky and earth. Each of us has this seed within us, this divine seed, this divine spark that can be brought into fruition, which manifested by the Egyptian mind to Horus. And Horus is the realized divine principle on earth. He is what all esoteric religions preach. This is the state of returning to the one. Remember, Horus was the 10. The beginning was Atum. There was a direct relationship. Only Horus and Atum wore the double crown of upper and lower Egypt in their portrayals in the temples. So there's a direct link between 1 and 10, the beginning of the created cosmos, the start of the original our cycle, and 10, the broadening of it. It brings it down to us, the inheritors, as the children of Nut, in the ability to take that seed that's part of every one of us and transform it into something that manifests And it's not easy. Very few people do it, but it's the goal. It's becoming that enlightened individual that is so elusive. But they cover it in detail. They hint at it, I should say, because we go back, and what it is just like Horus Moon, what you have to do is dismember the ego. You have to dismember that part of you. Otherwise, you'll never get to where the seed is to be able to transform. You're not going to be the same person if you decimate your ego. And you will then become a more enlightened individual, a higher individual. And that was that cycle, that waning cycle that they referred to. And then it would build. There are numerous forms of Horus. Those should be really looked at as just stages of becoming the process of spiritualization. And these aspects of Horus, in one way or another, will relate to that unfolding in that process in you. So on the myth, which we've covered in 45 minutes or so, we cover everything from their concept of the created cosmos to their concept of the best rulership on earth, the pharaoh, and then to how it relates to each individual in our time on nurturing that Horus, that seed within us, and creating a more enlightened individual. That's their story. There are lots of other offside facets, that we can talk about, but that's the basis of what is under that myth.
Yeah, this is a base myth, but it's really late, it was like 2000 years later when actual Abydos started with culture, and Abydos started way earlier. And we don't have straight evidence, but we have different things, like we know what first rulers was Horus, and Set again, like Set Peripsen in ancient kingdom in the first dynasty. So people already had myth about Osiris and Isis, I think, at this time. Also,
Yes,
we have
good point.
we have stuff like Hentiamenti, what were used in this area. Also, we have Isis temple in Dendera, actually, which was it's not Isis, but I guess it was Isis place during the
In Dendera,
Khufu.
yeah, Hathor and Isis were actually sort of merged their thinking. There were different aspects of the same mother
different
goddess.
aspects, but we know what we're talking about. It's Isis place. It's right by Abydos, and first stone structures, I guess, from Khufu over there. So this cult was existing before, and we definitely see deep roots of this myth. And I don't know, yes, first good description at the New Kingdom, how you say. But this cult and this culture looks like it was existing in Abydos like 1,000 years before.
Yes, yes, I agree. But see, where it's the old thing in modern scientific thinking. It may make sense, but it's just a hypothesis. And then they always say, well, you've got to prove it. And if you don't find something that you dig up, that says it's from the first dynasty, they're going to close their mind to the idea. They may entertain your hypothesis, but that's it. It's not proven.
It's not proven. I agree. But, we deep in this culture, so we feel the roots deep in Abydos area. Because it was different areas like Nehen, around where, behind Luxor. It's a different culture. It's not Osiris and Isis. And that's why my question is, do you think this Osiris and Isis was like regular people, like historical heroes who became a god, or it's just myth? This is my question.
Because no, that's a good question. I think my own feeling is that, remember, they are divine elements they're part of the fabric of the created cosmos. So they definitely existed. And those were what the Egyptians called Neteru. So they're in what we dub incorrectly as gods. So that, yes, this had to exist. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here talking. So it's fundamental to the structure. And 2 of those 9 are Isis and Osiris. Excuse me. So
bless you.
And you can even go, and then you go to the thing, the point, and you may have hit on it just a second ago. When you go way back to Abydos, and you go back to the second dynasty, and there were, the original kings all had Osiris which had the Horus god in it, but not all. In the second dynasty, then there was the Set god that is corresponding to our little story. When Osiris left, Set took over, or after he killed Osiris, he took over. And so you see that period. And then the final king of the second dynasty, Kamkawasta, he then reunited the Horus and the Set figures. So there's something, and that's at a time. And one of the I recall one of the things that they dug up in the region of Abydos was a plaque that talked about the battle between northern Egyptians and southern Egyptians, where Kamkawasta on the thing claimed he killed 46,000 of the they didn't call them followers of Horus. They called the enemy, but they assumed the enemy was upper the north. So yes, there are these little tantalizing bits that tell you that kingship was already implanted all the way back to the first dynasty. And yes, there's a twist to the story that you could argue, were the seeds for what the later myth. But it's even a little more interesting than that, because if you take a look at the Royal Turin Papyrus, which is the King's List, they don't start out with the first king of Egypt, the first pharaoh of Egypt. They go back. They're before the Egyptian dynasty, first dynasty began. There were the companions of Horus who ruled, and before them it was the gods. And that time span goes back, according to the Egyptians, this is their story in the 19th dynasty, 36,000 years.
Yes, I agree. But Horus was first ruler. Osiris was a leader. I say Horus was first king, first ruler, and Osiris was just a leader, a teacher. He never was a king.
Wow. Yes and no. Here's how. When Horus dies, he becomes foremost of the Westerners, who was Osiris. It's that coin thing I was talking about. Yes, Horus was always the leader. Did Osiris, as you said, was a teacher. He does not become in Egyptian kingship functional until he's already dead. Then he rules the other world, the netherworld. So he is there on the king. And again, you'll see on the king's list, they'll have the red crown and the white crown, upper and lower Egypt, but also one upper white crown. It was the one that Osiris always wore. So
yes,
you'll see that aspect there. But it was a Horus world for sure, in the living world. The king, Pharaoh, was the living Horus. That's what they call it. He was the living Horus. And he was, in the text, it's interesting because what they do, when they do greetings like hail to you, the hieroglyphs, you know what they say? Protect your face, because the brilliance of these divine entities was so bright, like looking directly in the sunlight, that you had to shield your face. That was their salutation. That's what it literally means in the ancient Egyptian language. So now where I was going to take that point, but I mean, it just goes to show you that the divine influence of Horus on the earth. The early kingdom really looked at him as a god. I mean, Khufu. Look what Khufu built. Look how long.
I see like these people with pharaohs like Khufu and who was before him, where all was like more divine person, because it's really different people built, like Imhotep, something like this, Chati, people who was real ruler, or who was built with Himiunu, who built the Great Pyramids during Khufu, but still he was actually person who built all this. So I think maybe like these early pharaohs was like a god when they did not really rule the country.
I'm sorry, you broke up there. I didn't hear the last thing you said.
I say these early pharaohs like Khufu, like Snefru, like Djoser, they were like a symbol of power, but real rulers was different people. Like I say, Imhotep and different charities who really was ruling the Egypt, and they were building all these structures of ancient kingdom.
Well, interesting. Imhotep is listed on the base of Zosier's statue that came from the step pyramid at Saqqara.
Yeah.
And in there, his titles are listed, but he's not pharaoh. He was vizier. He was the guy running it, but
so
not
actual power was at his hands.
Yes, very much. Well,
like,
yes. But and it was probably his design, which is why they much later made him into a god. He was one of the few individuals that was divinized, to the Egyptian religion and then worshipped, where he has chapels like other gods do. He's kind of like maybe he was the Einstein of the third dynasty. I mean, he certainly changed the world.
Yep.
But you look, and I don't know whether you had a chance yet to look at the papyrus that they found in the Red Sea about the Inspector Mayor, who is this is the one about Khufu's, and he was hauling casing stones for the Great Pyramid. And in there, he's got the name of the vizier in there, who is Khufu's brother-in-law. As Egyptologists had figured it out, but this confirmed it. But it was also the horizon of Khufu. It's written right in the text. That's exactly the name of the pyramid. There is no horizon of Khufu written on the pyramid itself. That's what they didn't do that in the fourth dynasty. They didn't decorate the outsides of these things. They did it in the mortuary temples and in the Khan pyramids, but not in the big pyramids there. But anyhow, there's a real record from 2500 BC of the actual construction of the pyramids. No doubt they were all Egyptians, and it was built by Egyptians, no aliens here. And it was now proven that it was actually Khufu's, or at least dedicated to Khufu. He obviously wasn't loading the stones up there himself, but he was in charge of the of the project. So there's a lot of stuff. It's so frustrating because we know so little of that earlier period, and that it's just been lost to history. An old friend of mine who passed away a few years back, John Anthony West, was the guy that brought up the idea that the Great Sphinx was much older than it really was.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to him about it, and he knew right away there's only one way this can be resolved, was by geologists. I mean, there was no way you'd be able to, figure this out other than it was water erosion and this was caused. And the geologists are still arguing about it, and they don't know. They can't tell. I mean, the stone structure was there. It was cut out, much like they dug the ditch back on the wall of Jericho in 8000 BC. They dug a thing that's 2/3 of the trench that ran in front that protected the wall of Jericho. It was built back in 8000 BC, so 10,000 years ago. These guys were able to construct something that was 2/3 the size of the Sphinx enclosure. When you think about it, that's moving a lot of stone, and without any kind of tools, but they were able to pull it off one way or the other. And so there's all these tantalizing bits, but they aren't going to make it into the mainstream, because the mainstream right now wants the proof, the definitive proof. It's part of the scientific method. You have to be able to duplicate the result.
Scientific method does not answer the main question. To build all this, what was built in Giza, you need to have science, engineering, and a lot of stuff. You need whole projecting institute but we did not find nothing like this. And this is the big question, because this structure impossible to build just from the head. You have to plan it. You have to design it. This Builder's City or Builder's Village with Mark Lerner and Zahi Hawass excavated in Giza, they found a lot of pieces of papyrus telling about how many beer, bread, or garlic workers have. And we know what they ate and how they live. But they did not find a piece of papyrus or piece of paper with blueprints, what they did. And this mirror, who you just told from Sinai, also, it's just an order. It does not say anything about construction, what they do.
No, he was just recording what he was bringing there.
And
he didn't say...
my thinking is to build this pyramid, only one pyramid, you have to have a lot of paperwork, you have to have a lot of mathematics and stuff, and it's impossible what we can't find a piece. We don't have a piece. I don't say about whole library of blueprints or something, but a little piece, and we don't have anything. And this is a question, how it's possible. But we don't have
theory is that it exists. It exists in the design of the king's chamber. It's a blueprint for the slope of the angle of the pyramid. It's all in there. It's actually part of a book I'm writing, and it includes the dimension and the slope of the pyramid. And it's intricate, and it's way more than I want to get into at this point. But the point is that may be and that would be just like they put it in there. You've been in the king's chamber, haven't you? Yeah. You know how it's empty. There's one little sarcophagus in there, broke. And what could it tell? But it does. The dimensions of it describe the pyramid. It's what is referred to as sacred geometry, but it is there. And this might have been the answer to why we can find a log of a guy hauling rock to put on the casing stones of the pyramid, but not one single papyrus for any of the pyramids, for the construction of any of the pyramids is missing.
This is a big problem, because the general manager who was building it, like with Vizier Himiunu, he's supposed to give to supervisors little orders for certain kind of jobs and labors. And after he's supposed to close it, how we do it now. This is huge project. It's supposed to be like 1,000 and 1,000 with small little papers describing what the person's supposed to do or this team supposed to do. Because we're supposed to know where we have to take this stone and where we have to bring it and put it, what place.
Right, yeah.
Somebody's supposed to check it. Somebody's supposed to all check what we built at the moment. Because it was not like this structure is completely projected before. We know it was a project. It was not like we built Djoser pyramid. We built mastaba. After we built second mastaba. After we built something else. It wasn't whole project. It was time to time we just added something new. But big pyramids, we constructed in one. We just was projected and constructed. It was not add-ons or something.
Well, see, in the amount of the organization in order to build something like the Great Pyramid is mind-blowing. But you had a workforce that were forced off their land because of the flood. So they had all these hundreds of thousands of guys that weren't doing anything for 4 months out of the year. It's to their credit to organize that, move them, feed them, get that thing to be able to build those things is almost beyond, I don't know how the heck they could. But they did. It's the same point you're making, I think.
I agree. But that's why with aliens, theories, and all this stuff existing, because we can't clearly explain how it was made by people. That's why we're giving soil to these people telling us about aliens. We don't have clear explanation of these structures.
I know we don't, but And I'm not even sure they could do it again today with all our knowledge. And the precision that they have on the alignment of them stuff is just, that doesn't mean, look, it's hard to believe that civilization is a linear step up. I mean, you look back even in our own recorded history, you had periods like the Dark Ages was a regression in knowledge, and then a Renaissance period, when it came back. So I'm sure that you had this stuff. There was technology that was probably lost in one of these down phases of the cycle, that did. I mean, if you look now like at Göbekli Tepe, in Turkey, that thing is right after the end of the last ice age. And if you look at the design of the columns,
it's not design, Charles. Pyramids, they have very smart and very nice design. You have to have science. You have to know mathematics, geometry. You have to know astronomy. You have to be educated person, just not only to build it, just this idea could come to your head. And we don't have any evidence what this science was existing at that time. There is no evidence, no piece of paper showing these people could know at least something. Because, with papyrus, when Khufu talking to Jedefra about Jedi, with old kingdom fairy tales. What we talking about? We don't talking about numbers or geometry. We talking about magic. We're looking for this box of with blueprints or some books or something. So it's not people who know how to build Great Pyramid. We don't talk about this.
Well,
we don't talk about magic.
Well, that's because it's still there, but it's just not appreciated by modern thinking.
No, it's
I mean, that's it. I mean, you go into looking at how they did this stuff.
Okay, do you think we could talk with Pythagoras, for example? Now, we're on the same page. He was living like 2,000 years ago, but he was an educated person. He knew a lot, and he could talk with us. We could understand what we're talking about. And what we see from these papyruses does not show the intellectual level of these people allowing to build these big structures and explain a reason why they do it. What's the reason? Also, it's a known question. Nobody knows what we do for. We have to say it's a tomb, but nobody found in it. Also, we have a myth what Khufu ordered to bury his body in another place, not in pyramid, because he was scared people gonna take his body or something. So even there is an ancient explanation why it's no body in pyramids. And it's a lot of questions, we can't answer them. That's why with all people with aliens, with something, we always tell stories, because this situation needs explanation. But we don't have good explanation. We just have it. And the same, our ancient Romans and ancient Greece, what we say? We say all the same like we say. We did not know what, we just explained what Egyptian priests told them. What it was, tomb of this king or something. But like people who research this, they already 2,000 years ago, they were talking how we talk now. We did not know what is it. Attraction to collect money, for tourists.
But see, a lot of those secrets considered, it's only a modern thing where we even think about people sharing all this knowledge and stuff. I mean, you look back at Egypt, a couple of percent could read and write. The rest of them were agrarian. So that there was this the structural, it was a very small number of people that did it. To me, the key of that Khufu papyrus about Mer's thing is it actually shows, it knocks out some of the theories about when the pyramid was built. So to me, that's one of the most concrete pieces of evidence that we have that shows that those guys, those Egyptians that were living in 2500 BC, were actually the guys that put that up. Why they came up with the design and how they did, we don't know. That's where I said, maybe it's right in front of us. Maybe if you look at the way the design of the king's chamber, it'll give you a clue to the design of the pyramid. But that doesn't answer the question why build it in the first place.
Yeah. And tell me, please, what do you think about Assyrian, when it was built and who built it? Because
Well,
this is...
that is one of the big disappointments when Jim Westerman was trying to pump his way down, because he was onto it. If you could have got down there, then you could look, to see, because I don't know whether you're familiar with the Satet Temple in Elephantine in Aswan. Yeah. It's got like 7 temples that were built on top of each other. Goes all the way back to 3200 BC, before there was even a united Egypt. But the spot they considered sacred. So it's typically to their mentality to keep on building on something else. Yeah. It would be. I thought we were going to have it. I thought you'd be able to get down there, and that would have resolved the issue, because it could have been easy that you would be able to tell that the stones would change between what was used on the upper part. Seti is responsible pretty much everything in that we can see. What's underneath it is a whole different issue, and once again, it eluded us, so that. And there's no funding to bring in even bigger pumps and try and do that. One of the things Jim was saying, he says, people don't really seem to care about the Osirian. Yet it was one of the most SETI cared about it, because it ties into what the myth I was telling you about. His purpose of using that was what he had to do after the Akhenaten heresy, where Osiris was eliminated and kingship was not the next Horus, but the son of the Iton, the solar disk. He recreated the decoration in there so that he had to go, by their standards, they had to go all the way back to the first occasion, Zeptepi. So they had to because of the havoc that, to their mind thinking, that the heretic did to the structural transmission of royal power from Father Osiris to Son Horus, was so devastated they had to go all the way back to the original creation to create it, and that's why and make it functional in his day. So he had to go back to day one, restructure it. That's what the design. That's why all those underworld books are in the structure, because they had it. Well, if you got to go back to the beginning, then you got to go back to that Heliopolitan myth, and you got to start where there's nothing to add to. And you start with that, and you make it flow. And that's what he did. And the decoration, I wrote 1,400 pages on the decoration in there that describes it. And
but
it doesn't answer who built it. And I say that right in the beginning. I say this.
Yes, I know. But my question is, what's your opinion? How old it is? How you feel personally, not based on evidence, just like feelings.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what my interest was, having been there a number of times, was that I wanted to see what SETI was using it for. Because I figure if there's anybody going to have an idea what it was really all about, it was more likely to be SETI than it would be Charlie Herzer. And so I really looked in to see what he used it for. And, and really, he used it for the transmission of royal power. I mean, the whole structure is just built for it. But maybe the placement of it, because it was Abydos and where everything started with Egyptian kingship, that might have been why he was there. And what was causing the water to come up, which apparently is in the Nile water table, that in the Osirian itself, according to Jim, if I'm quoting him right, then, he might have seen something that he used that would symbolize the establishment or the reestablishment of that royal power. And, if you're a king, royal power is everything to you, I mean, it's what you're really looking to preserve, because it's going to be your son. We know him, Ramses the Great. And so that, they had a vested interest in that. But my opinion is that, as I said, I wanted to see what SETI said. He says that was about reestablishing kingship. Very clear. They're written right on the wall. It's right in the central hall in that decorated thing. To fit the parts of the rituals that he used to do it can be pieced together, even going down into the sloping passage to get into the lower portion of the Osirian. There's the book, what we call the Book of the Dead, chapter 125. It's that tribunal of 42. Before you can enter what was the house of Osiris, that's what the area is the lower level of the Osirian. Before you could enter, you had to be pure, completely pure. You had to be void of Issa. And that's what that thing is. You got to recite that text to get in there. Chamber behind the central hall where the island is and the moat, that by the design of SETI represents what is inside of the mound. The thing, the platform that's built up that Jim Westerman says it's almost 5 stories tall, that island. And but that design, that program back there, what's left of it, had to do with what was actually going on to kickstart the creation as they envisioned it through things like that Heliopolitan process, creation process. So I don't know. I mean, I was so disappointed when he didn't get in. I thought we'd really have at least a clue to whether it was just SETI doing it or whether he had used something else, which that was typical Egyptian style. So, interesting aside, people always talk about pharaohs usurping other pharaohs' works, and putting their name on, taking out the other one and doing that. That's not pharaonic mindset. Horus, the living Horus, owned what was there. And that was a continuous string of things. The fact that Horus's name changed from whatever the surname of one pharaoh was versus the other, it was the same thing. There's a continuity. There's, to my mind and to their mind, no usurpation that was going on with this. It was just a reorganizing of the office of divine kingship. That doesn't help you.
Interesting. Interesting thing what Pharaoh Seti said, renew with Assyrian, renewed the place of Osiris.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I guess I would too.
So it's all interesting. Okay, thank you very much for your story. It's very interesting for us.
Well, I hope so. I don't know whether this